It is the 28th day of February 2015. Welcome to a very special episode of the SciFi Geeks Club from galacticnetcasts.com. It's special because we lost a huge person yesterday. Not huge as in physically huge, but huge as in a legend. Star Trek actor Leonard Nimoy passed away at the age of 83. And we just wanted to do something quick. Originally, this week, we weren't going to do an episode of the SciFi Geeks Club because of some issues involving staff and me working on our brand new website and just timing stuff. But this came about yesterday, and I knew that a couple people were around to do it. Not our normal co-hosts, but we're bringing in a couple of great former guests. In fact, we have our last guest of the SciFi Geeks Club, JF Dubeau, with us. JF, how are you?
I'm okay. Clearly, I'm not busy enough to refuse invitations like that.
You're just available. I mean, being busy and available and not available are two different things.
That's true. My schedule is full but flexible.
Exactly. See, that's my point. That's where I was getting at. And then we're going to travel all the way across the Atlantic Ocean and bring in one of the biggest supporters, biggest fans, biggest followers of our network, and a former guest of the SciFi Geeks Club, Mr. Daryl Johnston. How are you, Daryl?
Yeah, I'm not too bad, thanks, Dave. Not too bad at all.
Um,
Happy to attend and escape the family.
um, it's a terrible occasion to bring you guys both in on this because we lost, Leonard Nimoy. He was 83 years old. He's known for Star Trek. Of course, he did a lot of other things, but he's known mostly for Star Trek. And that's why I wanted to do a special edition of the SciFi Geeks Club, because Star Trek, of course, is one of the biggest sci-fi franchises in history. And JF, we were talking before the show began as to your feelings of his passing. Do you want to explain a little bit?
Well, we were talking about how we didn't want to have like the special be all doom and gloom, and I was saying, because I was joking around about us having to wear our sad faces for the podcast, and the reason why to me, obviously it's not a joyful occasion, but at the same time, if you look at the situation, if you look at the passing of Leonard Nimoy, while it's sad that we're losing him, his life is not something that really leads to regret as much as celebration. There's very little to look back on Leonard Nimoy's life and feel regret or depressed or unfortunate about. He lived to 83, which is not a bad age, and his entire pedigree is nothing but positive. Of course, it would have been wonderful to have him for longer, but at the same time, how can I say, it's not the first health issues he was encountering. It's tragic that he's gone, but he left so much good behind him that I don't feel terrible regret. How can I say, it's hard to express, but when my relationship with death is maybe a bit weird in the sense that I don't feel as much regret and sadness when someone dies old and well accomplished and well loved, as much as I would for someone who dies too young or without having achieved what they could have achieved or having left their mark. Basically, if someone lives long enough and doesn't leave behind too many regrets, I feel more like celebrating the life that was passed than mourning the death.
No, that's a good attitude to have, and I totally understand that. And looking back at Leonard Nimoy's life and career, nothing but positive stuff. Now, Daryl, how do you feel about the passing of Leonard Nimoy?
I must admit, I'll echo what JF said. It's always tragic when, especially an actor that you've grown up with, and because you've grown up with him, you sort of know him, but it's nothing that you cannot be sad. You can mourn his loss, sure, but if you look at the joy that he has poured certainly into my life with everything he's done, an ambassador for science fiction, he was a reason to tune in to TV at a certain time. That's a glorious thing that he's brought, and at 83, I think he'd look back and tell us that he'd had a full and enjoyable life. and especially because of the joy that he's brought. I mean, I'm going to say millions, but I think it's probably billion plus people.
Mm-hmm.
That's a gift.
One of my earliest memories was of Star Trek and Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock. I remember one of the first TV shows I remember watching was reruns of Star Trek, and I think that's one of the reasons why I'm such a big Star Trek fan and sci-fi fan is that early memory, especially Mr. Spock. He was cool without being cool. I mean, he was logical, that which made him cool, and just it's amazing to have something, a touchstone through your entire life. Like our lives, our whole lives, all of us, Mr. Spock and Leonard Nimoy's been there, and it's sad that he's gone. But let's look back at his life, his accomplishments, his characters, and that's one of the things that we're going to do here on this special edition of the Sci-Fi Geeks Club, taking a look at his biggest role and the role that he's most known for, and that's Mr. / Commander / Ambassador Spock. He had many titles, but
anything but Doctor.
Yeah, I hate when people do that. Oh, Dr. Spock from Star Trek. No, it's not Dr. Spock.
It's funny because you were mentioning how the first time you saw Leonard Nimoy was, of course, playing Mr. Spock on Star Trek, and it was the same thing for me. But if I need to be completely honest, as a child, I used to hate Mr. Spock. The character, the fact that he was emotionless, and I was young at the time, just made me really detest him. It's only as I grew older that I realized the whole emotionless character and the whole fact that the character was half human, half Vulcan, was to basically set the stage for this duality in the character, and that made me that flipped him from being a character I really hated to easily one of my favorite characters in Star Trek, because there was this depth that I didn't perceive as a child.
Daryl, how does Mr. Spock rank on your favorite Star Trek characters?
He's this. Oh, you can't rank the Star Trek characters, Dave.
You absolutely can, Daryl. Come on.
I'm going to say he's the second, but that's only, or joint first maybe with Bones, but that's only because of the dynamic on the show that he had with Bones McCoy. And those two were the reason I tuned into Star Trek. It wasn't to see Kirk get off with an alien. It wasn't to see Kirk have a fight with an alien. And it wasn't Scotty to give an frankly appalling Scottish accent going, "I can't do it, Captain." It was for the dynamic of Spock and Bones. And those two, that sort of almost married couple relationship, they're equal number one. You can't have a Spock without a Bones.
Yeah, that's definitely true, and I think that's really what made both those characters was that dynamic, and I totally agree with you. It's funny how early on in the original series, that's the relationship that was highlighted, but later on in the movies, it was more of a Kirk-Spock relationship that was highlighted. You guys feel for that too? I mean, is that a thing that you recognize?
Yeah, but I think that's more of an artifact of the movies having a shorter runtime than an entire season. So seeing that the main characters in Star Trek were always Kirk and Spock, and Bones as a close second to these two, but people tuned in mostly for these two characters. Nimoy and Shatner were the stars, and DeForest Kelley was more of a secondary character. So when they were writing and filming the motion pictures, they shifted the focus more towards these two characters and less towards the rest, because there's only so much that they can tell within the time frame of a movie.
Good point.
It's about pleasing the audience at that point.
All right, so let's. I want to read this. This was Leonard Nimoy's last tweet. It was sent early last week. Of course, he was hospitalized, and we talked about this. No, we didn't talk about it, but I believe we tweeted out or sent it out on our social networks that he was hospitalized late the week before. So he was out of the hospital this week, but this is what he said on Twitter. This is his last public statement. He said, A life is like a garden. Perfect moments can be had but not preserved, except in memory. And he always signed his tweets LLAP, which is live long and prosper. Did you know that Leonard Nimoy came up with, I think, that line? He also came up with the Vulcan neck pinch and the whole Vulcan thing with the hands. That's a Jewish thing, apparently. I didn't know that till yesterday.
I knew he came up with the that just annoys me because I can't do it. My hands don't work like that. I knew he'd come up with that. They originally, I think, wanted him to come up with a more sort of peace-like gesture, and if my memory serves me right, he refused and went, no, I'm going to do this. But I didn't know about the nerve pinch. That's quite interesting.
Yeah, because he thought a race like the Vulcans wouldn't throw punches. They would, since they're more logical and not as emotional as other races, they would do something less, I don't know, violent. And thus the nerve pinch was born.
Yeah, I knew about him coming up with a lot of what was behind his character, which is one of the things that highlights him as actually very talented for what he was doing. I didn't know that there was a religious connotation to the symbol for the hand splaying, if you will. I had heard that originally they wanted it to be like a peace sign, and he said that no, an alien would not do something so mainstream, and he came up with something else. But I thought he had just come up with the live long and prosper hand sign, if you will.
You both can do it. That's really annoying.
It's practice. It's just.
Yeah, it's years. It's years and years of practice. I mean, I think my muscles have been trained over time to do it. Maybe
you need to have been a nerd from a very early age so that you can practice it for literally decades until you get it.
See, what you could have done, Daryl, was early on in your life, just tie your fingers together, and that way, you know, it's like binding little girls' feet, you know, the Japanese feet. Same.
Yeah, it's the nerd equivalent of Chinese feet binding.
All right, so let's move on here. I found a couple of articles. You know, we want to celebrate Leonard Nimoy's life with his work and what he's done. So I found the best moments of Leonard Nimoy as Spock. So you guys can just jump in. Give us your thoughts on these or add new ones. Amok Time, that was the one where the ritual of Pon farr was introduced, the mating ritual, and it's the famous one with where Spock and Kirk fight, and Spock, quote unquote, kills Kirk. They do some mumbo jumbo. They make him dead, but then they bring him back to life at the end.
Well, the first thing I want to highlight is that as I was reading the show notes, I misread Pon farr as porn fan. Now I just can't look at the word anymore. One of the things I liked about that episode, and I actually want to bring that up earlier when we were talking about the relationship between the characters and the whole Spock being emotionless. This is the episode that when he finds out that Kirk is alive, he cheers for a brief moment before he catches himself. And that's something that was very interesting in Star Trek, because especially amongst the three main characters, because they built these relationships that they would use for a very, very long time, and once in a while they would punctuate by going outside of that relationship. That's a good example with Spock showing emotion for that brief moment where it's something important to him happens that breaks him out of his emotionless super logical state. And going back to DeForest Kelley, the duality between Bones and Spock is constant, and until once in a while there's a crisis. I can't come up with a good example right now, but once in a while there's a crisis, and then they get along for that brief moment in time. And these moments would not have the weight that they have, like Spock cheering for Kirk being alive, if they didn't have a whole season behind them of Spock just bitching about not having emotions and finding emotions almost repugnant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're totally right, and people forget that he is half human, so those emotions come out sometimes. They just come out. And that was a big moment. I mean, of course, he was excited that his friend and his captain was actually alive.
I like to think, especially because at the end of every episode, you got the bridge scene where they all share a little joke at Spock's expense.
Yep.
And Spock has a little eyebrow raise right at the end, yeah, as if to say, "I get the joke." And I've just had a quick scan through the show notes. I think Spock was a bit of a wind-up merchant. I think because of his Vulcan training, he was a bit more in control. Apart from obviously examples of Pomfar, but I think he was in a bit more control, but was still quite well in touch with his emotions. I'm going to put that out there, just because of the sly eyebrow raise and the way he'd feed a line, knowing full well that he'd provoke a response from the likes of Bones.
Yeah, I noticed that as well. I definitely think he was in full control of his emotions, except for Ponfar, obviously. And yeah, it's those funny scenes where that kind of stuff would come out. It would kind of bubble to the surface, and I think the best emotions and the best. I'm just trying to put this in the right wording. Being constrained as a character, you can do a lot with that. You guys know what I mean? Like being not being able to show so much emotion. When you do have to show emotion, it really stands out. It's really highlighted.
Basically, you can't rise to the challenge if there's no challenge. So having the challenge that he has to express himself through a character that is not supposed to express emotions forced him to go beyond what a normal actor that has full range could do.
See, this is why you are the author and I am not, JF, because you are very eloquent with your words. Thank you.
But your beautiful voice is what makes you the podcaster and not me.
Thank you. All right, so let's run down the rest of this list of great Spock moments. The Devil in the Dark. Of course, that is the one with the Horta. The Federation miners are, I think they're mining for dilithium crystals, and they get stopped because of these creatures called the Horta, and they're ruining their mine, and they're making these tunnels, and one of the crew injures this Horta, and Spock has to mind meld with him, and that's the famous line where he yells pain because the Horta is hurt.
Now the Horta, they're essentially the rock-like creatures, yes?
Yes.
Yeah, the hybrid rock pizza.
They do look. They did look like pizzas, kind of.
They looked delicious.
I think that's probably one of the finest original series episodes ever. It's got some killer lines in it, but Spock, the mind meld. As a kid, you can understand, mind melding another human, but mind melding something which is so alien, even to another alien. Awesome.
It was a great plot to put into it. I mean, a lot of people have mentioned on several other medias and articles that as much as you can fault the original series for maybe bad special effects, the acting wasn't always all there. The way the approach, some of the plots and some of the messages really brought out something special. And that episode in particular, what you're saying about the something that's so alien that it's alien to an alien. And just the fact that because everybody remembers the line pain, but don't necessarily remember, and I don't remember verbatim what came before, but he's basically asking, what is it like? There's a question that goes before it that makes the answer pain seem so more potent that it's. I should look it up because now I just sound like an idiot that's trying to make a point without knowing his facts, but Kirk asks a question before that, and while you guys talk, I'll try to look it up to see if I can find it. And it makes the fact that he answers just one word, pain, so much more interesting. So talk amongst yourself more.
Yeah, welcome to my world. That's me every day, all the time. Is I start talking and I don't have the facts ever to back myself up. So, welcome to my world.
Welcome to my profession. That's how I am at work.
But of course, you can always look up the facts. You don't need the facts right away. Come on. All right, so the next great Spock moment is Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. I believe, in my opinion, this is the greatest Spock moment in the history of Trek. It's, of course, at the very end when Spock realizes that he's the only one that can save the Enterprise to get the warp core back online. He has to go into that room with that radiation, and he's dying, and he says that famous line, which I have it towards the bottom. Let's see, what is it? You are my superior officer. You are also my friend. I have been and always shall be yours. Is that from that line, or is that earlier in Star Trek II?
Sounds more like something that was written than spoken. But I mean, you know how movie quotes are, like they get misremembered.
Yeah.
There's
No, it's the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. That's the line from the very that scene where he's dying in the radiation room. So, do you guys agree that that's a pretty kick-ass scene for Spock? Is Star Trek II the engine room scene?
It's. Oh, go ahead, Daryl.
I was going to say, I'm thinking, up until then, with regards to science fiction, whether it's been on the big screen or on the movie screen, I don't think anyone had included such a dramatic, emotive sequence of events. If you think about all of the films that have gone before it, regardless of whether they are R-rated like Alien or anything like that, nothing has been delivered as emotionally and as charged and has had such a lasting impact. Possibly, if I had a top 10 of scenes in films, that is right near the top.
Yeah, that movie was full of emotion because it also had the scene with Kirk inside the Genesis planet, not the Genesis planet, the inside the planetoid that they were testing the Genesis effect on, and Khan supposedly strands them inside the center of that dead planet, and he yells, "Khan!" That scene is also very emotional. So, lots of emotion in Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan.
And Wrath of Khan is also kind of a weird, especially for some of these scenes, the scene that you were talking about towards the end where Spock sacrifices himself. And this is going to sound maybe a bit snarky, but it's in Wrath of Khan you can see Shatner actually acting without hamming it up too much, especially in the emotional scenes, which I think people overlook that particular detail as being one of the things that makes that movie work better than the other ones.
I think a lot of that has to do with the directing and the writing. I think that movie, the reason it's considered by most the best Star Trek movie is because of its writing and its directing.
Right. Having a director that can control Shatner, that was probably what made it unique.
And he doesn't pronounce sabotage. Is it sabotage? No, it's...
Look, I'm Canadian. I'm not defending William Shatner's pronunciation, but I know that sometimes Americans and other countries don't pronounce things the same way. You have an aversion towards the letter U. I don't know why, but...
No, you're totally right. That's one of the things I've noticed from living in Canada is that whole ah and a sound. Because people say Mazda, not Mazda. That's one example, and that totally works into the whole sabotage thing. You're right. Good point.
Exactly. Different cultures, different ways of saying things.
It's like the difference between, going off topic, I know slightly, when in The Next Generation, if you got an episode that was directed by Picard, I would call him Picard, he would have him say boys instead of buoy, and it's the same thing with the way that with the way the great Bill Shatner delivers his lines, and I think that's a difference in how they were trained to act as well.
Yeah, I think you're right. Exactly. JF, did you find that scene from Devil in the Dark?
I can't find a proper quote, so I'm going to assume I imagined it, and that I'm slowly sinking towards insanity.
Well, the best thing to do in this case, JF, is to reenact it yourself.
If I could, if only I could. I was tempted to take to take a page out of the book of the internet and just pretend that everybody else was wrong. But no, I can't find the quote, so I'm going to assume it's not there, and that is just something I pulled out of my derriere.
No, I think the photo was talking about her babies, and that's why she was in pain, because of her babies. I believe that was the preamble to that line. I think. I just said
maybe.
All right.
I'm going to obsess over that all afternoon.
So there's two more on this list of great Spock moments from The Big Bang Theory. I don't know if either of you or both of you have seen the episode of The Big Bang Theory where Spock makes an appearance.
No, I've stopped watching Big Bang Theory because I call it nerd blackface.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say that.
Sorry.
I'm a fan of the show. I'm not going to deny it. I like the show, and I can see.
It's well written. It's funny and well written, but.
Yeah. But you know what? Don't blame the actors, because I listened to an interview on the Nerdist podcast recently with the guy that plays Howard. I forget his name, and they were talking about how the actors got so much crap early on because they weren't nerds. They were just actors playing a part, which most people are, and people have to remember that. So don't give the actors a hard time for them not being the real characters on that show, because they're, I mean.
No, I'm not asking the actors to be nerds, but it's I would say there's a tone to the show that I would say that makes it very. I don't want to say insulting, but anyways, we're going off topic, and this is. If you want at some point have that discussion about how I feel about that, I'll try to gather my thoughts on it.
All right.
But we're supposed to be honoring the memory of Leonard Nimoy, so we should probably go back to that. No, I haven't seen that episode, although now I'm a bit curious because a lot of Leonard Nimoy's more recent television appearances have been very interesting. I might bring some up later on, but
yeah,
I might revisit that specific episode just for that.
He doesn't actually show his face. He's just the voice of. It involves an action figure. An action figure, by the way, which I had growing up. I had that Spock action figure, and I had that full Enterprise bridge with the transporter that you put the action figure in, and you spin it and stop it, and he's gone, or you know.
Did yours break?
No, it didn't break, but I was an idiot back in the late '90s and threw it away. I threw it away.
Because I've watched that episode recently because they rerun it like you couldn't imagine in the UK. That's my lunchtime viewing is normally The Big Bang, and that episode. If someone came to you and said, "I'm going to pitch this to you. We're going to have an action figure, and it's going to be you'd be like, "It's just not going to work," but it works so well. Even the sequences where they're on the alien planet, and you've still got. Spock, a miniature Spock, delivering those lines. It's brilliant, and you can feel the warmth in Leonard's voice as he delivers the lines. And you'd think, I mean, I know what happens with a lot of actors is they spend time doing a particular role and they get sick of it. But you know that he embodied it so much. He did other roles, but it all comes down to Spock, and I think that episode pays tribute to Spock brilliantly.
Well, he had to come to terms with it, as well as anybody that's on a genre show like that, and that's what they're known for, because he wrote that book right after the original run of Star Trek, I Am Not Spock, and then years later he wrote that book, I Am Spock, after he actually came to the realization that this is pretty great that I'm playing this character that people love and know so well, and it's their inspiration. He really embraced it. I think Shatner did as well.
And it's a good character in the sense. I mean, it's not like writing being associated with Hannibal Lecter. I can understand wanting to not be perceived that way when you go to dinner parties, but being associated with a character that's known for logic, occasional compassion, and just being a force for good, and someone who's willing to make the ultimate sacrifice for his friends, these are not bad traits to be associated with.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the final one on this list of great Spock moments is when we first see him on the 2009 J.J. Abrams Trek reboot in the cave on the ice planet where young Kirk encounters old Spock. Pretty great scene. That was one of those moments that people were like really satisfied when that eventually happened. I don't like Into Darkness. I do like the original 2009 reboot movie.
I enjoyed Into Darkness. It was, how to say, it was to the tone of the new Star Trek. I think people were just expecting something different.
I just didn't like how they took some classic scenes from a great movie and kind of reversed them. Like in Into Darkness, it wasn't Spock in the radiation room; it was Kirk. And
my beef isn't that they reversed the scenes; is that
we lost JF. JF is gone. Well, now he's back. Here he
sorry,
is.
what was I saying? Where did you guys lose me?
Well, we were talking about reversing the scenes in Into Darkness.
Yeah, I was saying, like, I don't like the reversing the scene doesn't bother me as much as right after that reversal they basically Deus Ex Machina whatever happens and make the importance of the sacrifice irrelevant by making it not happen.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a sacrifice if the character can be brought back to life moments afterwards. Oh, spoilers.
I think we've it's been long enough. There's been enough time between the movie and now to.
Oh, absolutely. My philosophy is after a month, if you don't like the media enough to watch it, you probably don't care about spoilers anyways.
Yeah. Okay, so the next thing I got is famous quotes and lines from Spock from the movies and TV shows. So just feel free to throw in your own. These are just ones that are very, very famous. From Errand of Mercy, that's season 1, episode 26. Curious how often you humans manage to obtain that which you don't want or do not want. Which is very true, very poignant. The Doomsday Machine, episode 2, or season 2, episode 6. Vulcans never bluff, which is a great line. They don't lie. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Of course, we talked about that already from Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. Another one that I already mentioned once was, you are my superior officer, you will always be my friend, I have been and always shall be yours. Live long and prosper, which I think we should let the man himself say. So, hang on. I have it here someplace. Here we are.
Live long and prosper.
I found a Spock soundboard. There's a lot of cool stuff on here. What's this one?
I suspect you're becoming more and more human all the time.
Captain, I see no reason to stand here and be insulted.
That's what you were talking about, Daryl. Right there.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm just looking for my.
He was staying. He stayed in character, but he delivered that line like he knew it was going to be funny, which he's done a bunch of times in the original series. Bunch of times.
And we knew it had to be funny because we got that little music that told us that a joke was coming.
The stingers that you don't hear anymore in anything. That was like a very period-specific thing that happened on TV.
It's of its time.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so more quotes from Spock. Of course, live long and prosper. Fascinating. He said a lot. In fact, I found a Blaster posted an article with all these great moments from Star Trek and Spock particularly, and there's a video of him all this times he said fascinating. It was pretty cool to watch. Here's the line that I mentioned earlier from Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. Spock says, after Kirk tries to hug him, Spock says, "Please, Captain, not in front of the Klingons." Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home. Are you sure this wouldn't be a time for a colorful metaphor? In fact, I would argue that Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home has some of the best lines of all the Star Trek, like some of the funniest lines of all the Star Trek movies. Just the interaction. Go ahead, Daryl.
Like I say, for me, culture shock Spock, as he's wandering around, still in a daze. Yeah.
Yep.
It does it for me. Now, I've visited LA, California, and that's what I was like. I was culture shock Spock. I was just walking around.
Culture shock Spock needs to be an action figure.
or a punk band. The name of a punk band, Culture Shock Spock.
But I do like what Kirk said to Whale Lady. Notice how I'm, and that is, don't worry about him. He did too much LDS in the '60s.
Yeah.
Now, that whole scene leading up to that it's just perfect. It's such a feel-good film.
They drop him off in Golden Gate Park, and what's her face goes, "So you can just leave him in the park?" And Kirk goes, "It's his way."
It's funny because Star Trek IV gets a lot of crap when people watch it in retrospect because it's such a lighthearted, almost comedy version of Star Trek with the whole fish out of water thing going on, and there's a lot of time gags with Scotty trying to talk to a computer, which sounds ridiculous back then, but now it's something that we all do all the time, and we even have names for our computers. But that being said, one thing that people seem to forget when they rewatch Star Trek IV now and look at it be all giggly and funny is that it came at the tail end of two of the heaviest Star Trek movies. Star Trek II, where Spock dies, and then Star Trek III, Spock comes back, but then Kirk's son dies. These are two very heavy movies back to back. So having this the Star Trek IV be a lighter movie that kind of brought back the fun of Star Trek, I think was important. That's what made it popular at the time.
And then there was the crap storm that was Star Trek V right after it.
Yeah. We didn't talk about Star Trek V.
I think they tried to do both in Star Trek V. They tried to be serious and funny at the same time, which doesn't usually work.
And they tried to be deep. They tried to be very profound and failed tremendously miserably.
Yeah. All right. So those are the great lines. Oh, one more thing about Star Trek IV. I like the whole scene in the pickup truck when they're talking about going to dinner, and she asks them if they like Italian, and Spock says no. Kirk says yes. Spock says no. Kirk says yes, and they go back and forth to finally Spock saying yes at the very end.
Now I just want to rewatch it.
Yeah, good stuff.
It's been a while since I've seen any of the original Star Trek movies.
It's fun to revisit them once in a while. Like I'll catch them on I won't purposefully set out to watch them. I'll just see them on TV and just watch a few minutes or watch the whole thing once in a while.
That's how I justify going to McDonald's. It's never intentional, but if it's there.
All right, so let's talk about the essential Star Trek, the original series episodes. I mentioned a couple of these in the famous scenes, but these are actually episodes that are pretty Spock-focused, and I think we can all agree that all our yesterdays was a great Spock episode where he actually falls in love with a girl. Who was the actress that played the woman from the 1930s in that episode? Daryl, do you know?
I would not remember.
I have no idea.
Famous actress. She did a lot of TV back in the 60s, and a lot of movies too.
If only we could look it up on some kind of infinite database of trivia and information somewhere.
One of you guys can do it. Whenever I try to do something while I'm actually podcasting, my computer slows down to a stop, so I can't really do much on my end. One of my all-time favorite okay, let's talk about all of our yesterdays. Are you guys fans of that episode? You guys familiar with it? Number one.
I'm presuming that's the hippie episode.
No, this is the one where they go through the portal, the one that goes showing all these scenes from history, and whenever they jump into it, at that point they jump into that time in history. It's the Guardian of Forever, I think.
Got you.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that the hippie episode that you're referring to, no one remembers that one fondly.
Oh.
Even hippie.
just me then.
That's the one where the guy is playing some kind of like instrument and they're singing, and it's all very late 1950s.
It's the one where they all get high.
Yes.
Is the actress you're talking about Mariette Hartley?
Yes, that's her.
There you go.
Thanks for doing the research. Appreciate it.
Let's all take a moment to thank Wikipedia for having all that information available.
Good job, Wikipedia.
Go donate.
Don't
They
forget.
need
Yeah,
it.
I was going to say, don't forget to support Wikipedia.
Well, that's why I'm mentioning it. We all use it, but very few people actually contribute to it.
Balance of Terror is another one of my favorite Spock-centered episodes. Actually, it's less Spock-centered and more like it kind of shines the light on Spock in a bad way. Not something that Spock does is bad. It's just it talks about discrimination, because that's the episode where the Romulans are first introduced. And when you see him on screen for the first time, because the Federation had never seen a single Romulan. They were at war with the Romulans, and they never saw them. So when they did finally see them, they realized that they look exactly like Vulcans. And like crew members were like, we're kind of looking at Spock a little bit differently because of that. And that's the reason why that is such a great Spock episode, is he has to deal with that racism and what's the word I used before?
Prejudice.
Prejudice. Thank you.
What I find go ahead, Daryl.
No, sorry, Jeff. Yeah, go for it.
What I find interesting about that episode, apart from the obvious message about prejudice and intolerance, is it sets up is the first time at least that I was introduced to the concept of a race splitting on the planetary level, where the Romulans and the Vulcans used to be one species, and then part of them left somewhere else and create their own society, and then re-encountered each other being so different. It's a sci-fi tool that's so interesting to explore, especially when you push it beyond to the concepts of panspermia and like the idea of seeding planets. That was my first introduction to those concepts, and that left a mark on me.
Yeah, it's something that isn't really used that often. It's not a plot device that's used that often, and they do it so well. And the whole backstory of why they left and why they're so different is also very interesting as well.
And then in Next Generation, bringing back the whole concept of reunification and everything that spawns from there was, I mean, from that episode spawned entire storylines of Star Trek material.
And speaking of that episode, that two-parter of Next Generation, Leonard Nimoy was in those as Spock again.
Absolutely, he was the one behind the whole idea of reunification. That was one of the character's main goals in his later years.
Mm-hmm. And wasn't that okay? Wait a second. The evil person from the 2009 Star Trek, was he Romulan?
Yes.
Okay. So that kind of spawned that storyline in a way, because he was working with the Romulans at the time, and then their world was destroyed, and that's kind of how that splinter in time happened.
Yeah, if I remember clearly, he was actually trying to help them, and that backfired somehow, and that's where the whole time travel. So yeah, if you want to look at it this way, the 2009 Star Trek movie, an alternate timeline, is a consequence, a long time butterfly effect consequence of the of Balance of Terror.
This just blew my mind.
Of themes introduced in Balance of Terror.
That is crazy to think about, how that all that stuff is connected. to the original series, the Next Generation, and then the 2009 movie. It's weird to think about.
It's kind of beautiful in a way.
Yeah.
That shows the visionary that was Gene Roddenberry, and yeah, up until Gene passed on, the influence that he still had with Star Wars, the universe that he created, why Star Trek? Did I say Star Wars?
Yeah. Okay.
Why it was such an endearing universe, and why the characters he created were able to have an influence all through the timeline. But it's good that you can trace it back through the episodes to the first meeting and what that means, because then you touched on the racism issue, the way that people looked at Spock. But if you go to trying to think, it was the Next Generation film where they then First Contact, where they first meet the Vulcans.
Mm-hmm.
It all ties in. So that undercurrent of mistrust was there, and it's just blown my mind, the fact that you can trace it all the way back to this original episode.
Yeah,
and from the very few episodes of Enterprise that I watched, I think that's a theme that kept going, where they mistrust their Vulcan officer on board.
Yeah, well, the thing behind that was the Vulcans held the humans back for so long. That's why they didn't trust them. That's why they had that animosity.
And again, Balance of Terror is another example of exactly that. It's the Vulcans hiding important facts about the galaxy, mainly the fact that Romulans, a race that the humans are at war with, is actually an offshoot of Vulcans, holding back that information and keeping the humans in dark yet again.
One of my favorite episodes was the Menagerie Part 1 and 2, because they took the original pilot episode, The Cage, and kind of shoehorned it into the story of Spock's life, Spock's career before Captain Kirk commanded the Enterprise. It's the one where he brings Pike back to the planet where he had that encounter with those aliens on The Cage. Have you guys seen both The Cage and the Menagerie episodes?
Yes.
The Menagerie, yeah, that's the one with Captain Pike in his wheelchair, yeah?
Yep.
Yeah, able to answer by flashing his light.
Yeah. You'd think that they would have had better technology than that, in the whatever 23rd century.
Absolutely.
What, you were going to say something else, Daryl?
No, I've got to be back in a second. I've just got a low battery alert. This is,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll carry on. Yeah, I really like the whole dealing with his loyalties being torn between his current captain and his former captain, and him not being able to reveal why that he's basically breaking all this Federation law by stealing Captain Pike. And it's cool how they that original episode of The Cage was actually
it was a pilot, wasn't it?
Yeah, and
that was the original pilot.
They never had. Yeah, that's the one that they first proposed to NBC, which they turned down and said make a second pilot, which was very that was very rare for a network to say go ahead and try it again. And it also shows that Leonard Nimoy had been in Trek the longest than anybody else. And
I may be wrong, but I think one of the reasons was that it's what was her name again? It's God damn it.
Majel Barrett.
No.
Jeffrey Hunter.
Lucille Ball, I believe.
Desi Lu.
She owned the studio, and she championed Star Trek. Probably not knowing exactly what she was championing, and she's the one that pushed to have Star Trek made when it probably shouldn't have been, considering studio attitudes at the time.
Mm-hmm. You're correct.
Oh, I don't know if that's true. What was I going to say? Well, there's two things about the Menagerie that's interesting. First of all, the loyalty aspect that you're describing has I don't know if it was very well expressed before the menagerie, but from then on and throughout the movies, Spock's level of loyalty to his captain and his crew has always been a hallmark of the character, and that's something that was really underlined and very well expressed, and is the underlying theme of the menagerie. So if we're talking about things that define Spock and define Nimoy's character for Star Trek, I think that's probably one of the cornerstone episodes. And the other thing that it reminds me is that Nimoy was literally there from the beginning, even before Shatner and a lot of the other actors from Star Trek. He was literally there from the get-go.
Yeah, the only other one that was there from the get-go that continued on was Majel Barrett, who passed away quite a while ago, probably more than 10 years ago, I think.
I'm terrible with dates. I still think it's 1986 right now, so I don't know. I can't remember exactly.
None of us are wearing. None of us have a tail, or what was another fashion trend in 1986?
We're all wearing hammer pants, right? I'm not wrong about that.
Ripped jeans is another one. Acid wash ripped jeans in 1986. That was a thing too, I think.
Maybe.
Daryl, are you back? Are you?
Yeah,
good?
I'm back. I'm back now. Hopefully I'm plugged in.
Okay. So before we move on, do you have any thoughts on the Menagerie episodes, part 1 and 2?
I must admit, it's not one of my favourite episodes. It just didn't gel with me. I suppose it developed the Spock character on the lines that his crew could see the man that Spock was. Mm-hmm. But it's just not one of my favorites.
I think they were probably looking for a way of using that old footage and looking for a cheap episode to produce, because they had already produced the Cage, and I think the only thing they had to do was colorize it, or because the original Cage episode that I've seen, no, not colorize, it wasn't finished really. So they finished the scenes they needed to for that episode and left the rest of it kind of in that crappy condition. All right, so how about the Galileo 7? How's that grab you, Daryl?
I'm trying to remember. I'm really trying my hardest to remember it.
I hope you can, because I can't remember a thing about that episode.
Okay, it's the one where Spock is in command of the Galileo 7 shuttlecraft. It crashes on that planet. The planet is populated by like these monstrous ape-like creatures, and I believe one of the members of the crew dies, and he keeps on making these decisions that he thinks are logical, but they keep on basically backfiring on him, and he begins to question his own abilities, and the crew is questioning him. It's very much an episode about either going with logic or going with what's right.
I think these are great themes, and it's an interesting way of exploring it. But I'm gonna say that you're inventing that, because I can't remember. Dave's just making things up now.
I swear to God, it happened.
No.
Hey, Dave, tell us about this Galileo 7 episode, because
you seem so knowledgeable about
the one that I made up in my head. No, it's a great episode. It really he's torn, he's conflicted, he's wrestling with his emotions, which the character is always best when he's dealing with his emotions. And go ahead. It's there if you want to watch it. It's there someplace. Go find it and watch it. I recommend it.
I'm going to have to now, just so I know it's real.
Shut up. And our final one on this list, there's more. We'll have the link posted in the show notes. There's more episodes. I think there's 10 of them. We're only talking about, 1, 2, 3, 5. So there's 5 more that you can see. That if these weren't good enough for you, check out the article and watch any other ones that you like. Kind of your way, our way of honoring the legend that was Leonard Nimoy and the character of Spock. The final one on my list is Journey to Babel. It's the one where the Enterprise is hosting all these representatives from these different warring factions, Like you had the pig people, I forget what their race name was. The Tellarites. You had the Tellarites, and then you had the ones with the antennas on their heads.
The Andorians?
The Andorians, thank you. And also there was Spock's father and mother, and it's the first time that they're shown on screen, and then it's the first time that they deal with Spock's relationship with his parents, and he has to basically decide between saving Sarek's life and taking command of the ship because Kirk is also injured. It's a weird episode that there's two major injuries on board the ship at the same time. He's got to decide where his loyalties. Another episode where he has to decide where his loyalties lie.
I think that episode is mostly important. Like you say, it established a relation between Spock and Sarek, but it also introduces Sarek, which becomes not a frequent but extremely influential character in the series. We were talking about the whole reunification thing, and pretty much any time that they had an episode that dealt either with Vulcan or with important diplomatic talks, they would at least name drop Sarek.
And that actor later appeared on The Next Generation, a great episode where he's dying. He's getting so old that he's losing control of his emotions. Have you guys seen that episode of the?
Yeah, it's basically the episode where he gets Vulcan Alzheimer's and starts projecting his emotions to the rest of the crew.
A great episode. Great episode.
It's alright. It's good.
Wow.
Good.
I remember watching Journey to Babel, and at the time thinking, well, that explains a lot about Spock because his dad is an idiot. Sarek really, really annoyed me, and he annoyed me the position he just put his family in with his just straightforward. No, this is the straightforward, logical way. Yeah, damn everything else. Yeah, logic has to win. And I remember the dynamic between Sarek and Spock's mother, whose name escapes me, and thinking, how could she? How could she be with such an ass? And that's when you could see Spock's sort of humanity come through as well as his logic, and it was a real understanding episode because you got that dynamic. You got Spock's parents, and you sort of realised that as a product of that marriage, of that union, how Spock could be the ruthless logic that he had, as well as the slight glimmers of humanity.
And Sarek was a lot nicer in the 2009 reboot movie, definitely.
He chilled out a bit, yeah.
Yeah. Too bad his mother died so early. Oh, sorry. Spoiler alert.
It's been long enough.
All right, so you guys want to add anything, or did you take a look at the link to see the other episodes that you want to say anything about?
As I've already told you, Dave, on social media, my all-time favourite is Mirror Mirror.
Yeah.
Where you get evil Spock.
Oh yeah,
you get the sinister logic.
Yep, that's on that. That's one of the episodes that was on this article that I didn't throw in. But yeah, that's a very good episode. I love the scene at the end where Kirk has to convince evil Spock to basically let them go. That was such a great scene. Like he's like pleading his case in front of the court. And Spock is so good as an evil Spock. He keeps his emotions in check, but he's evil at the same time.
Although as a goatee beard wearer, I don't think he did any of us any favours, because I think that popularised the myth that people with beards may be slightly evil.
I think you're right.
It said 3 guys hanging out on the internet wearing beards.
Wait a second. Yeah.
Or variants thereof.
Yeah, we're all evils. We're all evil.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That just means that this is the mirror universe, Dave. Just remember that.
That's why Anessa and Brad aren't here. Anessa, Brad, and Matt.
Yeah.
That's why they're not here. It's the alternate Sci-Fi Geeks Club.
And you're in both of them. That's kind of odd. I'm sure it means something.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
that ties in nicely to one of Nimoy's later works in Fringe.
Hmm.
yeah, and that's the next thing we're going to talk about is Nimoy's other acting roles. Like he was, what was his? Do you guys remember his character name in Fringe?
William Bell.
Bell. William Bell. Belly.
Yep. He was great in there.
He did. I say he did a good job with the very few appearances that he did have. Basically, creating a character that had a lot of mystery to him, and being both sympathetic and dark at the same time, depending on what the episode needed, without making the character itself look too schizophrenic.
Yeah.
I have been frantically trying to look for one of the lines of dialogue between William Bell and
Olivia.
What's his face? Yeah, Walter. And it's there's nothing. And I'm paraphrasing. There's nothing I wouldn't do with every atom of my being. I wish I could remember it word for word
I think it's his final line in.
It's the way it's delivered is it's beautiful.
It's Nimoy-esque, shall we say?
It was really cool to see him back in front of the camera again, because it had been a long time between the last major role of his, which I think was the last Star Trek movie, and then his role on Fringe as William Bell.
Yeah, I remember watching Fringe at the beginning, and just we were looking for something to watch. It was sci-fi, and J.J. Abrams was involved, and it was okay, kind of funny and interesting. And when I saw Leonard Nimoy in the credit, I got kind of excited because it lent this little series more legitimacy just with that little credit name than having J.J. Abrams, which was right on. I think he was still working on Lost, or we're just the tail end, but was a legitimate TV director, and yet you just toss in Leonard Nimoy in there, and that just tripled the legitimacy of the series.
That really says a lot for the man, about the man, that, him being in something brings it up a notch, Oh,
and a huge notch in this case.
And playing a character that you're used to, a friendly character, and William Bell was, as you've already said, JF, he's so dark. The secrets that he's been keeping. Just any of the episodes where he featured were just you were blown away by the depth that was being delivered. Really,
like I said, it was interesting to see the character go from very warm to very dark in almost the same scenes. He lent the character depth that the script. I mean, I don't want to say the writers weren't doing a good job, because obviously they were. I mean, it was Fringe turned out to be a very good series, but it takes a talented actor to be able to bring both sides of that particular coin together in one character without making it look disjointed.
And it was kind of interesting how J.J. Abrams brought two elements of Fringe into the 2009 Star Trek: alternate realities and Leonard Nimoy.
That's true. But I would say one of the reasons why I'm kind of excited to see J.J. Abrams at the helm of things like Star Trek and Star Wars is you easily get the feeling just through what he does and the projects that he chooses to do that he's one of us. He's not a stranger to nerd things. And obviously sometimes he'll put a twist on something that we may not necessarily always agree with. I mean, not everybody liked Into Darkness. But at the same time, if I were to ask any nerd, tell me what you would do, I may not agree with what they would say either. It's not like the opinion of the nerd and geek community are necessarily unanimous.
It's going to be interesting to see what he did with Star Wars, just because I know he's a bigger Star Wars fan than Star Trek. It's going to be, I think he's going to bring in that love of the franchise to that movie. It's going to be cool.
I'm optimistic, but then again, I'm a utopist. I'm always optimistic about things.
That's true. Okay, so the next thing that he was in, it was early on in my childhood. I remember this is back in the 70s. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the show In Search Of.
No.
It rings a bell, but not as something I've watched, but mostly as something I might have heard about.
It's a documentary series. Basically, every week they investigated some weird phenomenon in the world, like Bigfoot, UFOs, weird crypto stuff, and he was the host. He'd appear on a camera once in a while, and he would do the voiceover for it.
I so need to dig that up.
It's good stuff.
That doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, I've never seen the series, but I know that Nimoy was he was a bit of an unexplained nerd. He did enjoy that. I don't know if any of you have been to the Griffin Observatory at all.
No.
No, he's honestly, just pop to LA and go. It's
just pop to LA. I'll just take a bus.
Yeah, absolutely. He's got a hall in the observatory, and he delivers a show about the universe. And I can imagine that the observatory got the idea from what you've just described, Dave, in search of. It
was cool to see him back on TV again, because it was his first TV thing since Star Trek. And it's you just have to see some of the video because it's so 1970s. He's got long hair and not plaid pants, but polyester pants. It doesn't hold up well. It's a sign of the times.
I'm gonna dig that up. I'm gonna see if it's streaming anywhere because I love cryptids. I love unexplained stuff, and I could stand to listen to something narrated by Leonard Nimoy.
Daryl, I know that you're a fan of weird stuff too. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's my YouTube viewing sorted.
Okay, so he did a lot of voice work. I'm guessing he did other documentaries and those kind of shows, but he also did the voice of Sentinel Prime from Transformers: Dark of the Moon. He was the voice of himself on The Simpsons.
And Futurama. Well, he was the voice of his head in Futurama.
Okay, all right. He's the
voice of Galvatron.
Yes, that's true. Let's not forget that.
The original voice of Galvatron, and I don't know. I know Galvatron's meant to be evil, but the way he delivers Galvatron's lines, totally. I mean, inspired choice for Galvatron.
A couple of his earlier roles, the movie Invasion of the Body Snatchers, I want to say 77 or 78, I think. And of course, Mission Impossible. He was also a series regular in.
I haven't seen enough of the old Mission Impossible to remember that. That's interesting. That's news to me.
Yeah.
I noticed, Dave, you haven't included any of his music with Bill.
Oh, I wanted to avoid that. It's just.
I actually want to bring it up because I don't know if you remember a couple of years ago, he did this commercial with Zachary Quinto for Audi, I believe.
Yes, that's a great commercial.
Now, let's remember, first of all, it's a great commercial. It's a lengthy commercial, obviously. It's kind of a stunt commercial. But you'll remember that there's a point where Leonard Nimoy is driving his car as Leonard Nimoy, and he's humming a tune.
Uh-huh.
And the tune is, if you listen carefully, and everybody that's listening to this podcast, take a moment, shut down the podcast, go to YouTube, search for Leonard Nimoy car commercial, listen to it, and without doing these searches, listen to what he hums while he's in his car. Now, then come back. Okay, you're back? Fine. Now, if you didn't recognize what he's humming lines from the Ballad of Bilbo Baggins, which is a ridiculous music video in which he sings about Tolkien's Bilbo Baggins, and it is a ridiculous. It is the most 70s piece of crap I've ever borne witness to.
Totally forgot about that. I knew that he did music. I just totally forgot that he did that particular song. That's awesome.
But isn't it beautiful that he references it in a car commercial?
Yes.
In a Spock versus Spock car commercial to boot. I think that commercial is probably it's his magnum opus in a very tongue-in-cheek way. It's his resume.
Yeah, no, it was done very well. And somebody had to be. It was either him that brought that up, that had that idea, or like a very good director writer that knew that it thought would be funny to have him humming that song.
Whoever had that idea is a genius and should be recognized for it and given some kind of Nobel Prize.
Daryl, your thoughts?
JF is hit the ball on that one. Seriously, I listen to Nimoy and Bill singing every now and then on my way to work or when I'm in my car. So
Wow.
That's dedication.
I know. Oh, it just feels good. It sound, it's a sort of happy sound. It's not meant to be taken seriously, and it's meant to spread joy. And it's another way which he did.
That's very well said, because I hear a lot of people, like, you might have noticed I say that a lot, that I hear a lot of people crap on things. It's because I hang out on the internet, and the internet is an extremely negative place. So there's a lot of people that will complain and say, oh, how Leonard Nimoy and Shatner, like, how could they sing? Their singing's terrible, blah, blah, blah. They say the same thing about Brent Spiner. And I don't think any of these people realize that this is all tongue-in-cheek stuff. None of these, I mean, Shatner doesn't think he's the next Sinatra. He knows, he's extremely self-aware about his tone and his character.
He's made a career of lampooning himself.
Yes, I'm pretty sure that's what's on his business cards at this point. William Shatner impersonator.
Speaking, going on a quick rant of William Shatner, did you guys ever watch that reality show that he hosted back, I want to say, early 2000s, where he went to Riverside, Iowa, which is his fictional town in Star Trek where Captain Kirk was born, and it was like he was basically fooling all these people into doing things, and one of the things was a shat, which was his hat, and he called it the shat. This is another thing.
I think you're again making up a brilliant thing that never happened.
No, look it up. It's the best.
JF, this is a mirror universe thing. I feel.
Oh, I
the
see.
universe I normally inhabit. These don't happen, but I think we've got evil Dave, in the mirror universe.
And he's bringing us tales of the wonderful television shows that we don't get in our universe.
You're making me second guess myself now. It's like, did I erase this or didn't I?
How much drugs did I do when I wrote that document?
Yeah. Dave's gone all Galileo 7.
Yeah,
all right.
Perfect. Bring it back.
That's going to be a phrase from now on. All right, so I want to just wrap things up by talking about him as a director. He directed a few things. Most notably, 3 Men and a Baby, the original movie.
That is like the non sequitur of his career, isn't it? Like Star Trek 4, Star Trek 3, 3 Men and a Baby, because of course.
There was some other stuff on the list previous to the Star Trek movies, like he did a episode of T.J. Hooker. He did another episode of some other TV show, but nothing to that level. Like 3 Men and a Baby is actually critically acclaimed as a good movie.
Wait, go back. Leonard Nimoy directed an episode of T.J. Hooker. Nimoy directed Shatner in a non-Star Trek setting.
Yes.
You must see this.
I know. So yeah, there you go. That's our look at the life and career of Leonard Nimoy as Spock, mostly. Before we wrap things up, I want to kind of just play a few more of these clips of Spock from Star Trek. Here's one.
Greetings and felicitations. May I say that I have not thoroughly enjoyed serving with humans. I find their illogic and foolish emotions a constant irritant.
Then transfer out! Freak! Spock, you're the most cold-blooded man I've ever known.
Why, thank you, Doctor. I can answer questions at this time.
I wish there was a fascinating one on here, but there's not.
That's weird. You'd think that would be available as a ringtone.
What's that?
You'd think the fascinating quote would be available as a ringtone at this point.
Yeah. Oh, here's one more.
At times, you seem quite human.
Captain, I hardly believe that insults are within your prerogative as my commanding officer.
Sorry.
I love how he genuinely apologizes.
I know. All right, so that's going to do it for this special episode of the Sci-Fi Geeks Club. Before we get out of here, though, we have the splash page, the only non-Star Trek related thing, because Gregor does such a great job and puts so much into these. Let's play the splash page and find out what's happening in the world of comics. So here we go.
Hello and welcome to the Splash Page, brought to you by the Eltsners. I'm your host, Gregor Sprague. Married comics writing duo of Matt Fraction and Kelly Sue DeConnick have just signed a 2-year deal with Universal TV. And the first comic that will be adapted to the television screens is one of Matt Fraction's comics that he co-created along with the artist, Chip Zdarsky, Sex Criminals. Now, the series follows 2 characters, one male, one female, who discover that time around them stops when they orgasm, allowing them to enter a state referred to as the quiet. And when the 2 characters enter a romantic relationship, they decide to use their time-stopping sex powers to rob a bank and save the library where Susie, the female protagonist, works. Under this deal, we could see other comics be made onto the TV, such as for Matt Fraction, Odyssey, spelled ODY-C, which is a gender-swapped cosmic retelling of Homer's The Odyssey, as well as Satellite Sam or even Casanova. And from Kelly Sue DeConnick, we could see the Western fantasy series Pretty Deadly, or more recently, the comic book, which has only had 3 issues out so far, Bitch Planet. And now a couple quick shot stories. CBS adds a new character to Supergirl. According to Variety, the actress Callista Flockhart from Ally McBeal and most recently Brothers and Sisters will play Cat Grant. Guardians of the Galaxy Easter egg on Parks and Recreation finale. Star-Lord met Star-Lord, where Chris Pratt, who plays Andy Dwyer in the show, met a group of trick-or-treaters, and one of them was dressed up as Star-Lord. Just a cute little thing I thought I'd add. And now for the new releases coming out March 4th, 2015. From Dark Horse, you have Hellboy and the BPRD number 4. From DC Comics, Detective Comics number 40, Grayson number 8, Justice League 3000 number 15, Names number 7, and Swamp Thing number 4. From IDW, G.I. Joe number 6. From Image Comics, Rat Queens number 9, and Saga number 26. And from Marvel, All New Hawkeye number 1, Guardians Team Up number 1, Princess Leia number 1, Rocket Raccoon number 9, Spider-Woman number 5, and X-Men number 25. This has been the Splash Page, brought to you by the Eltsners, and I have been Gregor Sprague. We'll see you next time.
All right, thank you, Gregor. Check out our brand new website. It's live. It's totally different. Daryl, I showed it to you just recently. What did you think? What do you think of the new website?
It's a really clean website now. It's a really clean, easy to navigate website. I like what you've done with the place, Dave.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I had all of our stuff was kind of spread around. Like we were using this this web service called Weebly. So our main site was there. Then our podcasts were in Blogger. So I basically took everything, put it under one roof. We're hosting our own content now. So if your feeds are all messed up, that's why. We had to transfer the feeds from FeedBurner to another service. So I apologize for that. That's the last time it's going to happen for a while. So leave us feedback, galacticnetcasts@gmail.com. Call our voicemail number, 805-328-3966. We're on iTunes and Stitcher, so please leave us good feedback and 5 stars on iTunes. That helps us get more listeners. We're also on Twitter, Facebook, and Google+. JF Dubeau, do you want to real quick tell people what you have going on, where people can find you on the internet?
I'll make this brief. It's not. It feels weird being promotional on that kind of episode. If you're into sci-fi, which obviously you are, if you're listening to this, and if you're listening to a tribute to Leonard Nimoy, I wrote a science fiction book about robot. It's actually a very kind of has a positive message. It's kind of utopic as it's less dark than what we tend to see. It's called The Life Engineered, and you can find out more at jfdubeau.com. That's jfdubeau.com/books.
And Daryl Johnston, you've got a website as well, right?
Yes, I have. Yeah, it's imperialsteam.com, and coming soon, I'll be starting my own podcasts. And fortunately, because Canada is part of the Commonwealth, and a lot of sci-fi is filmed there'll be a lot of familiar content coming your way, including a bit of Star Trek. I believe.
Cool. All right. Yeah, Daryl gave me the very first non-published episode of Imperial Steam, and I like it a lot. So it's something that you guys should be looking forward to, and we'll have you back on to promote it when you get a few episodes in the can, Daryl.
Excellent stuff, Dave. Look forward to it.
All right. I call this episode or this meeting of the Sci-Fi Geeks Club adjourned, and in lieu of our usual gavel, let's go out with the man himself, the man that we're going to miss greatly, and let's just let him take us out. Here we go.
Live long and prosper.